Hey listeners, welcome to episode 141 of the Ceres Podcast. In this episode I talked to Austen Morley from Morley's Coffee in Aberdeenshire. So stop what you're doing, do me a favour, press pause, jump over to Facebook and Instagram and follow Morley's Coffee. We've had many fish and chip related podcasts in this new season, so we thought we'd start mixing things up a little and start talking to people on other sides of the hospitality industry. Don't worry, fish and chips are still at the top of the list. We've still got lots of those being planned. We also have some bigger plans in the works for us to push the Ceres podcast a little further. We'll start telling you about those in probably the second part of February, which isn't that far away by this point. So, Morley's Coffee was established in 2020 with a goal to expand the reach of artisan coffee across Scotland. With the help of a fully restored 1972 Citroen Hy van and custom-built flight case carts, they look awesome. Morley's Coffee is fully dedicated to mobile event coffee catering, attending markets, shows, festivals nationwide. Austen is the owner and barista. He discovered his passion for quality caffeine kick down under in Australia, where the third wave coffee was in full swing. Listen on to find out the differences between first, second and third wave. Coupled with his work for a niche food brand in London, took his idea for a mobile artisan coffee back home to Aberdeenshire in Scotland, where a clear gap in the ever so competitive market was needed. I absolutely love talking about coffee. I love it as a drink, but I'm fascinated massively by the business behind it. If you throw into the mix an up-and-coming person like Austen, who's grafting and making great coffee with great sourcing and great ethics, I think it's a good person to have on the podcast. To give our listeners a little treat, I'd like to buy the first 5 of you that listen to the Ceres podcast who get in touch with me a pouch of Morley's 1972 blend coffee beans. If you don't have a grinder, let me know and I'll order some of the Morley's 1972 ground coffee. So get in touch and I will personally, out of my own pocket, buy that and send it to you. I do love the AeroPress. If you haven't got one, get one. I do like the Chemex jugs too, but they're just really fragile. They chip and they break very easily. I'd love to know about your coffee preferences. Are you making coffee at home by freshly grinding beans, or are you in too much of a rush for that and just use ready to go dried coffee? In this episode introduction of the Ceres podcast, we focus on the Ceres Natural Degreaser. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to talk to you about a game changer for keeping your hospitality business spotless and free from grease. Introducing the revolutionary Ceres Natural Degreaser, your new best friend for turbocharged cleaning. You all know how stubborn grease and oil can be. It almost feels impossible to get rid of. Not anymore. If you run a street food business, fish and chip shop, restaurant, you name it, it feels like everything can get greasy to touch. Uniforms, cloths, even underfoot, no matter how much you mop. The powerful Ceres Natural Degreaser is a force to be reckoned with, making light work of even the toughest grease spots. And the best part, it's completely natural. But don't let that natural composition fool you. It's tough, proper tough. Cleaning oil and grease is usually a daunting task, but with the Ceres Natural Degreaser, it comes as a walk in the park. It's quick, efficient, saves you a ton of time and effort, specially designed for professional kitchens. This potent powdered degreaser is a must-have for anyone dealing with these greasy surfaces. It's as effective as those harsh corrosive degreasers, but without the nasty chemicals. Nothing caustic, no perfume, no dye, no phosphates, no BPA. Just a clean, neutral finish every time. But it's not just for kitchens. You can dissolve the Ceres Natural Degreaser in water for a pre-soaking solution that tackles all kinds of stubborn stains. From coffee, yes, coffee too, and blood, and of course, grease. Really dirty grease that's just not very nice. It's a lifesaver for fish and chip shops, restaurants, hotels, street food vendors, caterers, really anybody who has greasy challenges. The Ceres Natural Degreaser is your all-in-one solution. So, why not revolutionize your cleaning routine today with the Ceres Natural Degreaser? Purchase it from ceres.shop with free shipping too. And think of your teams. They don't want to be working with nasty chemicals. Now, let's get back to our show. Is there anyone you think we should be talking to on the Ceres podcast? Is there someone that's doing something really interesting? If that's a big yes, let me know at Stelios at worldofceres.com. And we have some really great guests lined up for the Ceres podcast. If you want to keep in the loop with what we're doing at Ceres, you should be following us on social media. But to get the information delivered to your inbox, join our mailing list, and the link is going to be in the episode show notes. Be sure to let us know what you thought of this episode with Austen, and jump over to Morley's Coffee on Instagram and Facebook. And remember, the first 5 listeners to get in touch will get free coffee beans ordered and paid for by us at Ceres. Austen, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Hello there. How you doing?
I'm really well, actually. Thank you, mate. The weather's been a bit windy down here. I was driving yesterday. It was really windy everywhere I was going. But yeah, it's not as bad as you guys here up there, I guess. So,
yeah, no, you guys get it off a bit light, don't you, compared to us up in Scotland?
Was it last year that I saw a tree fell through your house?
About 18 months ago, we had one of those wild storms that a tree branch came right down through my bedroom window.
Well, that's never good, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not good. But fortunately, we've had so many trees down now that when storms do come, like we've had in the last week, there's no trees left to come down.
Well, silver lining and all that.
Silver linings in a way, yeah. But we've gone from like Arctic snow to storms in a week. It's just all over the place at the moment.
Wow. Well, for those listening, you are from Morley's Coffee. So when you've got weather like that, surely it makes people want something warm inside them.
Yeah. I mean, cold weather can be very useful for coffee for sure. I don't know too much about the lashing rain and amber warnings for rain and stuff. There's only you have your real hardened caffeine addicts coming out in that weather. But it seems to do quite well all weather year round, coffee.
You still see people walking their dogs, though, when it's bad weather. They just carry on.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
They just think, you know what, I've got my wellies, I've got my coat, and they just carry on. Like, I wouldn't probably want to. If I didn't have to go work, would I go out? Probably not. I'd stay inside. But if I've got to go work, I'll go. But yeah, there are some hardened people out there that just think, you know what?
Yeah.
And there's other people that get a snowflake on their car and think, I'm not going nowhere today. So,
you get two very different types of folk. You've got your hardened dog walkers that will they'll go out rain and wind, and you got folk that just won't go out if there's a drop on the car.
So I've been watching your progress for some time now. And for those that also want to follow your progress, they can just go to Morley's Co. on Facebook and Instagram. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how it started. How did you get to this point?
Yeah, well, I think for me, my journey started when it was probably the end of university for myself. The second wave of coffee had just kind of become a thing in the UK. You had your Starbucks and your Costas popping up, and it was becoming a bit of a trendy thing to go out for a coffee and things like that. So I kind of got a little bit of exposure to it at the end of university. Started getting into making coffee at home. And then for me, the real thing was when I went out to Australia, and I went and travelled for a year out there, and just got exposed to a whole new level of coffee making, which was so different to back home, but just seemed the absolute normal thing to do. It was just everyday life there in Australia. And I guess it just had a really strong effect on me, really. Took it back home.
What do you think they were doing differently to what we were doing in the UK?
They didn't get the influx of the big chains So they didn't have Starbucks and Costas there. They focused very much on the artisan specialty, the independence. Really, that was the key thing. Every neighborhood had a coffee shop, and there was a bit of a community around that, and everyone went to their local coffee shop, local coffee
so they
bar.
almost
That was the biggest difference. They skipped the phase almost.
They skipped the phase almost, yeah. So, and is that phase now trying to catch up? Do you think is Starbucks and all them lot trying to catch up? Would you say?
A little bit, yeah. I'd say perhaps convenience has come in to it on the other side. So they set the bar with artisan, and then actually went, how do we try and pull in more people? How do we appeal to more of a demographic? And I think in Australia, drive-throughs and stuff have all become very popular because everyone drives out there. There's so much space. So they've gone out from the town centres and they've gone into these drive-through parks and business parks and stuff. So I think it's probably merging into a similar area, but they very much started the other way, which kind of set the precedent for people's mindsets on how they perceived coffee. It was a little bit different.
In a way, I bet at least the Australians have probably had access to better coffee before then getting probably what would they consider a mediocre coffee. But at least those, let's say the Starbucks and so on, they'd probably have to go into that market with a better offering from day one, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they probably have to. They have to sort of pivot to the demographic that they're in front of, and I don't think an Australian would. They're slightly different culture there. They prefer a bit like the Italians, maybe just something that's got a bit more strength and things like that as well. So they're not looking for those massive big lattes or black coffees or something. They're wanting the full whack of the double espresso shot.
I never thought those would be very popular in the UK, but then if I'm sitting in a coffee shop and I see someone ordering like this, I don't know, the biggest cup that they do, with all these sweeteners and the creams on top. And so it is something that is popular in the UK. And I wonder if the UK sort of sits where we sort of half copy the Europeans and then half copy the Americans. So there's quite a big mix in the UK. So it's always interesting. So you come back from Australia, you come back to Scotland, and then you think, all right, I'm going to do something. And what is it that gives you the inspiration to do what you do? And what is it that you exactly did?
So when I came back, I actually didn't go straight into coffee when I came back. I did a sales and recruitment role down in London for a bit. Mm-hmm. And again, down there, exposed to a load of small independent food and drink companies. It was just massive. It was almost overwhelming, really, how many companies there were down there doing very, very niche things. And I used to do a lot of field sales. So I'd be going into these outlets, like your Whole Foods and Planet Organics, and I just see all these different brands. Just every week there seemed to be a new stockist coming in. I guess it just gave me a lot of ideas, really, with how I could bring that back up north to Scotland, where there just wasn't that same level of influx of brands and companies. So I always remember one of my former MDs saying to me that there's always room in the market for another quality product. As long as you're trying to do it as best as you can and it's as high quality as you can, there's always room for something else like that there. And so I kind of just took that sort of collaboration of ideas up to Scotland, and that's where the mobile specialty coffee business kind of came into it. So I realized that my niche was not necessarily in bricks and mortar. I realized that perhaps my USP was in taking that specialty coffee on the road to events and shows and markets.
You literally can camp anywhere with your equipment. You go somewhere, you can just be there next day. And obviously social media is a big thing for this, because if we rewind 20 years, you wouldn't probably be able to just pop up somewhere the next day as quickly as you could today because of social media. And if you've got a following, you can just say, well, we're going to be here tomorrow. If you're there walking your dog or if you're there for an event, we're here. Whereas, years ago, you just probably couldn't do such a thing. I love the van. I think it's very good quality, detailed. Although I was quite shocked that you can't drive it, which now I found out that that's quite normal with those sort of vans, that they can't actually be driven that much.
Kind of half and half, really.
Half and half.
It is fully road legal and drivable, but you're not going to want to drive it more than 20 miles or something.
Right.
So you can sort of there's a radius around the house that you can facilitate for, but if you're doing events further afield, it goes on a trailer.
Just purely because that is an uncomfortable drive?
Yeah, oh god, yeah. It's an old Citroen Hy van. It would try and kill you. It's got the old drum brakes, and there's no fuel gauge on it, so
wow.
Just better safe than sorry, and stick it on a trailer.
Yeah, you're probably right. And then you've got your stock in the back of the van as well, I guess. So that's the other van as well that you're pulling it with.
Yeah.
Give us an example. What sort of events that you're doing? Do you also just park up regularly in the same place once a week, let's say, as well?
I sort of quickly found, because I started just at the other side of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off with a regular trading pitch because people just couldn't go out and about that far. They couldn't drive too far away from their house and stuff like that. So I started off with a regular pitch to begin with, but then kind of quickly found out that for mobile specialty coffee, that actually my best scene was at the events and shows and festivals and farmers markets. So I sort of slowly transitioned over to that, and I'd probably say now, 3 years later, that's what I'm mainly focusing on. Kind of got a bit of a calendar, for different festivals and shows when May, June, July, August sort of comes in, and we just kind of go in week to week to different places, packing up, setting up, doing the show, and then moving on again, really. And I've found that actually, from a footfall perspective, that was key, really. You're paying more pitch fees, and your costs and your travel go up a bit more, but you're getting in front of people a lot more easily. And like you were saying before, there you can say on social media, "Oh, I'm going to be in this particular pitch for this week," or you have a regular pitch that you attend. But sometimes it's just better to be in front of, be at the event for being just one of the reasons that someone goes to you, so they're not just there for you, but they're there for the event. And that seems to do quite well.
So it's a bit more be where the people are rather than they be where the coffee is. And that's slightly different. Yeah, because if you are just choosing a fixed place, let's say, where people walk their dogs, and we're using this analogy now because it's landed.
It's common. Yeah.
But let's say you're there's no guarantee that they will want a coffee, so they're walking past. Whereas chances are, if you're in a very busy venue where usually drinks aren't as flowing as the food, let's say. So, and there is an obsession with people having a coffee now. Like I mentioned earlier how we copy the Europeans and we also copy the Americans, but it's almost like if we've not got a bottle of water in our hands, it's a cup of coffee, and it's just like I don't know. I don't even know if we think we need it. And I was thinking about this earlier. I have coffee and tea out of routine now, and it's just become a normal thing. Am I thirsty? No, probably not. Do I need the caffeine? Probably definitely not. It's just become a habit that I live for now. So people are looking for that. So you're in these events. So you'd rather be, what I took from that is that you'd rather be, even if you pay for it, in an event with thousands of people.
Yeah. I would. I think it works well with my personality type and all that sort of stuff as well. I if I'm going to go out with the van, I like to go out knowing that we're going out for a full on event, full on session.
Yeah.
And we can, with that, you can plan your stock and all of that a little bit more easily, and you can have a bit of a calendar that you work to. And it's full on. It's hard. It's hard work. It's long hours. You're doing at shows and festivals and stuff. So it's just all go when you get there. But no, it's very rewarding when you do pull off a really good event, and the revenue speaks for itself as well. So
throughout my research, I've done coffee podcasts and I enjoy coffee, but one of the biggest things that I can't look away from is the fact that it's a very saturated market, and yet you chose to go into it. And you mentioned what your boss said. What were your fears going into a very saturated market? Did you have any, or did you just think, no, I'm doing a very unique product and that's stronger than my fears?
I think location for me had an important thing there. Had I tried to do mobile coffee down in London, then obviously there'd have been a lot more competition and limited spaces for perhaps events or a particular street trading location. But because I was taking that back up to Scotland, where you're always a little bit further behind the trend, I thought, actually, no, that's going to work in my favour. So for me, knowing that it was popular, I still knew there was a gap there up here for more artisan coffee. So,
and with it being artisan coffee, how do you manage with volume? Can you keep up with the volume? If you're, let's say, a busy event and it's just constant coffee, 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 give us a breakdown in your thought. Like, what can you do to sort of catch up with the queue? Because obviously it takes X amount of time to make a certain coffee.
Yeah, it was a really good question. That was one of the things that I realised when I first started doing the events, that there were a lot of vendors that were doing coffee as like a secondary part of what they offered. So they were doing food and they were doing drink, or they were just a bit of a jack of all trades. And like you said, they couldn't get the numbers through. So you would have people waiting in a queue for 20 minutes, half an hour, and they just wanted at one latte. But their order was sandwiched between all the food, all the drinks, a massive, combination of everything. So I kind of realised that actually at these events that it was important to focus on volume and be very, very have a more limited menu, but really focus on just coffee. So then all of the equipment, the fit out, the workflow in the van, it's all tailored towards getting that coffee out, in a quick way, but also trying to maintain quality at the same time. So we've got, a particular workflow, the way the worktops are all lined out, the equipment's in a specific area, etc., etc. And, we've got like an order point, we've got a collection point, and we just try and really work to that workflow. Really, it's so important, especially in a small space as well, because the van's not massive, so you're trying to get those drinks out as well in a confined space. So every square inch is valuable. So, but that's what we do. That's what we did instead. So we focused on that side, and that seems to have worked quite well because people don't have to wait so long. They know exactly what they're going to order when they come to our van. They know it's coffee and a few little light bakes and pastries and stuff. But for the most part, it's hot drinks.
I remember someone saying, like, if customers have to choose what they want when they get to the counter, you've sort of failed as a food business or a hot food or a hot drink business. You want people to almost know well before they get to the counter what it is they want to order. And if you think it's probably easier for the likes of the big brands because people sort of know what to expect from them. But whereas a new business or something quite artisan like yourself, you don't know, like, is the coffee going to be dark? Is it going to be light? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? So you want to sort of see what the person in front of you is getting. But what you don't want is someone to come to the front and be like, stare at the menu and just be like, and then everyone behind them starts huffing and puffing. And I think that's probably good that you've kept a small menu, because if it was large with lots of additions and customizations, that's just going to slow you down, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'd be surprised what people don't see when they're out and about and in a public space. I mean, there are plenty of people that don't even see our menu board, and it's a large 600 by 800 mil menu board on the actual door of the Citroen van. But you'd be surprised some people can't even see that. So knowing what they want before they get to me is really important, because they see the espresso machine, they know Morley's coffee, it's all just right there for us.
So in their mind, they probably think they know what they want, but I guess they probably think all coffee is the same. So do you ever get it where you might make someone a flat white and they've compared it to something else that they've had somewhere else and thought, oh, this isn't what I was expecting, whether better or worse, it just wasn't what they were expecting?
I mean, that's the thing with coffee as well, is it's quite subjective and it can vary depending on where you go. So because there's so many different types of coffee outlets, you've got your artisans, and then even within the artisan bracket, you've got baristas and shop managers that want to do or portray their coffee in a slightly different way. So, you might have people that focus more on more developed, darker roasts. You might have people that want to go super light, or maybe they prefer a different brew method as well, So there can be a bit of variation in that as well. But for the most part, I think if your brand is also really important with the coffee as well, because that's so important with social media and Instagram and stuff as well. People they've got to get a picture of a coffee as well, They've got to be seen to be at that place too.
And I guess that then makes your message travel further. So if you just had a plain white cup or a plain brown cup and someone then puts that on social media, and let's say even if they tag you, because I don't think a lot of people would look at the tag. So if they tagged you and said, oh, Morley's coffee and wherever it was, let's say X stadium, and then the cup doesn't say anything, I feel like you've missed a trick there. If that cup isn't branded, you've missed another messaging point.
Yeah. The branding, the cup is a fantastic marketing tool. So is all your signage as well. It's amazing the psychology that goes into signage and just your online presence, but also your boards, and it's just somehow communicates something different perhaps to the customer, that they maybe know, maybe this is gonna be high quality, or this is gonna have a bit of a trendy sort of feel to it or something like that. So even that typography that you use, and being very consistent with the fonts you use, the branding, the color palettes as well. So for example, like we've got like a specific set of colors that we use, and our background is like a creamy sort of oatmeal color, and it seems to be quite recognized as well as the color of the van as well. We picked a dark sort of teal blue for the van, and that was a very on-trend color for the next sort of couple of years. And we do get lots of compliments on that, which is great. So all those small things seem to come together to make the experience for that customer a good one. And
then it's your job to match that coffee with that experience that they've now built up visually. For argument's sake, I'm not knocking any coffee, but if you've built up this experience, this brand, people have followed you on let's say Instagram for a while, and then they come to an event and you're there, they're like, oh, Morley's Coffee's over there. I fancy one of those. I've seen it and I want it. So they come over, and I'm going to make a wild exaggeration here because I know this isn't true, but they come over and you give them a Nescafe that's foamed up with a bit of water and milk. They're going to be like, So how have you tried to bridge the two with coffee choice, coffee bean choice, the way you prepare it, and the brand that you've built up around it? How have you tried to fuse them together?
It's a good question. If you're on the sort of event track a bit more frequently, people do tend to think of your brand as synonymous with good quality coffee. So there's a bit of, being around for a little bit of time that helps with that as well. But I think there's also coffee and design goes together very well. So there's always a combination of the two, So again, like I said before, with your menu boards and your signage and all of that sort of thing, if you can transfer that well from what people see online to what they see in person, then I think that element of quality just kind of comes with it. And then you've also got reputation as well, because that's also really important when you do these events. If you're consistent, I think there's some sort of stat where if a customer comes to you and they have a bad experience first time round, I think there's a 70% chance that they're never going to come back to you again. And all those little things kind of go inside someone's head before they make the approach to go in a coffee shop, whether it's a bricks and mortar or a mobile shop or something. They're always thinking about that past experience. Maybe the barista wasn't friendly to them, Maybe the barista was having a bad day. So it's really important for me to always try and be smiley. And if I'm having a bad day personally, but you try and mask it and make sure that you give that customer a good experience, because the stats say that they're not going to come back if they have a bad one.
You are on display.
Absolutely.
I came through working in the fish and chip industry, and I was a server for a good few years, and then I was a fryer for a few years. And my dad always said to me, it doesn't matter what's going on in your world, you've got to make that customer feel like they're special. Or, and I remember sometimes, even now, like you go to the barbers, and if they're having a bad day, you don't like that experience. You're like, because it's such a close experience, especially a haircut. But you're having a haircut or a shave, and if they're in a bad mood, it's a connective process. So
absolutely,
it feels like that was stressful for you too. So, but I also feel that when I go to a coffee shop, and quite honestly, people knock me for it, but some of the best service I've had is somewhere like McDonald's, because they do teach their staff to switch off from the outside world, and when they're
absolutely
in that room, they're there for the customer. But you do go to some places and you think, oh, it's going to be nice here, and because that person's having a bad day, that becomes your bad day, and I don't like that transference. I've never liked that transference.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I think there's a bit of a push in the coffee industry as well to make sure that customer service is driven, as high as it possibly can. And in fact, there's actually some businesses down south that focus on more automated equipment, which allows the barista frees them up a little bit from the stresses of trying to make an artisan drink, because obviously there's a step-by-step process with making a coffee drink, and there is a high degree of concentration that's required for that too. So if you're having to try and keep communication with a customer, even if you're not speaking to that person, you're keeping eye contact. But if you're trying to make a very good quality drink at the same time and deliver customer service, if you're not on it personally, one of those things is going to fall. Either the drink's not going to be as good, or you're not going to put in that time to speak to the customer. So there are businesses that are looking at like automated equipment, and then they specifically hire front of house staff that are just very, very personable. And every time that customer goes in, they're greeted by a full-on American enthusiastic whack of, "Hey, how's it going?"
I'm not sure I'd like that, because I think I know they're going to tell you that machine's going to make coffee as good as a person.
Well, yeah, that's another thing as well.
They're going to tell you that, but whether I'd like to see what I'd like to see actually is, can it make coffee better than a person on a bad day? Because that if it can do that, then I'm sort of happy. But can it make coffee as good as a person on a good day? And I'm always going to be inclined to say no.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables in coffee that perhaps maybe the technology's not quite there. I think a skilled barista is still going to be able to squeeze out a bit more, but it's getting close. Honestly, it's getting close.
But it is, and it will only get better, I guess. But I guess it all depends what's expected of customers. If they want that, like you say, that excellent customer service that feels like it's a friend, and someone to listen to their problems, maybe a bit like a bar, then you can't also make a good coffee at the same time. You can't have both of those things. So,
well, definitely not in a high volume environment.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a bit different for a coffee shop, which has more of a sit down culture. People, they'll have table service and things like that. But if you're at an event and you're doing 600 plus drinks in 5 hours, I mean, I think even the customers at that point know that there's not much of a chance for a long chat. They're just getting their drinks and going.
Well, you'd probably think in an event like that, they just want to get their coffee and walk off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They don't want to come away from the event. They just want a quick drink and go. So for us, it is important. It is important. But if you're at those really busy events, you've got a little bit of leeway there too.
As a customer, I literally will just be like, I get the basic pleasantries out the way. So if I came up to you and ordered a coffee, I'd be like, "Oh, can I have a black Americano, please?" "Yeah, not bad." And I'd be like, "Good day?" "Yeah, great." And I'll just step back. There you go. And that's it. I've done my bit. I feel like I've done my bit. I'm now leaving them to do their job, and hopefully they can just focus on doing it great. But you do see there is the consumer that does want to have that whole full-blown chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's someone a friend of a friend. You always know someone at these events. Someone will recognise you. So that can be quite tricky as well.
You do a lot of social media. You put yourself out there. Do you find that people have this like a familiarity complex where they now probably know you a bit more, and they probably, well, at least one-sidedly, they feel like they know you a bit more. So can that ever slow down service, or has that not been a problem yet?
No, not too bad. No, I think that's only if people are familiar with you from online, it's only a positive thing, really, if they reiterate that in person. So, that just tends to be a small part of the pleasantries at the beginning, and then we sort of, crack on with the drinks afterwards.
If you was to fast forward 10 years, would you like more vans, more mobile setups, or would you like a combination of static sites as well?
That's a very good question, and something I've been thinking about a lot recently too, just in how do I take this business model, how do I grow it effectively? Because I mean, there's one route I could do, and like you say, I could go down adding more units to things and almost kind of franchising things out a bit, keeping the brand and things like that, but almost kind of providing that incentive to someone else who perhaps wants their own mobile space, that maybe wants a little bit of assistance in there, and you could use the brand, and that could be a good way in there for them. But then you've got to be perhaps around the right locations. You've got to be able to access those as well. You've obviously got more maintenance and repair as well too. Plus, that individual has to be competent, or at least confident enough to drive or tow a trailer and stuff like that as well. So you've got all of those practical skills that come in, as well as also demanding that person to be a good barista too. So that's quite tricky. But then is it good to go into bricks and mortar at the moment? I'm not sure. It's a lot of uncertainty there, and you start bringing in rates and rent as well. So, and then you're fixed in that one location. So I'm very used to at the moment going to an event, having a good show, having a good festival, coming away from that, and then you're able to tap into another market, another demographic, which is quite nice. And you've got a lot of variety there too. Whereas with a bricks and mortar premise, I don't know, I think you've got to be in the right spot. You've got to do a lot of good research to make that happen, because there are so many cafes that offer a fantastic product. They have a good menu, they do really good coffee, but for some reason, and they always seem busy as well, but they somehow just can't make it work. And whether that's staffing that becomes a problem, rates, or rent, who knows, cost utilities, it's hard to say. But it's something I'm deliberating at the moment. So I'm kind of at a bit of a crossroads.
I think what I like from what I see is that you get all the good bits. You go to an event, regardless of whether you pay or not. You've got the event, it's yours, you serve all those customers. And I guess there's probably other hot drinks on site. I guess there must be to some degree.
Yep.
But again, there's a lot of consumers that want hot drinks. So that's sort of probably, it's probably a good, what can I say? There's a lot of consumers. So it doesn't make competition that, you're not too scared about it. So thinking about it, then you don't want none of the negatives that come with a fixed site. But you'd like the positives, but you just don't want the negatives, which is fine. And like you say, every fixed site nearly does coffee now. Like whether it's McDonald's, Greggs, restaurants, hotels, supermarkets, cafes, like everyone's doing coffee. And I guess that could saturate the market. That could tip the balance the other way. So do you then build a franchise, a business where they only have a trailer or a van? They're mostly based for rural businesses where, because there is a lot of rural areas in the country that probably would be very similar to where you are in Scotland, whether it's Cornwall, Norfolk, loads of areas, North Wales, South Wales, so many areas. So could that be something where you could say, we're going to supply you with all your coffee because you also do the roasting, you do everything from scratch, we're going to supply you with your coffee, your EPOS systems are connected to us so we know what you're doing. We get either a cut or a percentage, whatever it is that we figure out. There's a franchise fee. You probably eliminate the need for a trailer, and you probably think we'll just get nice looking vans rather than a trailer that has to pull a really nice looking van, if that makes sense. Because I think, don't get me wrong, I think that does have its place, and I think it looks really cool. But I think it's probably going to add complication to whoever does it after you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because they're not going to respect that. They're not going to respect the fact that it's a 50-year-old van that doesn't have a petrol gauge, and they're just going to be like,
No, that's true. That's another sort of hurdle to overcome is getting someone that's got the balance of those skill sets, really. So you're probably better off looking at some, I guess, semi-permanent locations like statics. You can obviously get vans or containers which are semi-permanent there. And so you're not having to necessarily move the unit, but, at the start and end of every trading day, which might make more sense. I guess with that, like I say, it can just be a bit tricky to find the locations and the land that you have consent to trade on, and that's another tricky thing, because when you start trying to do street trading locations, you've got to get permission from the landowner and road services and any sort of planning and stuff in there too, and you've got to find a location that's busy enough, that's good for business, but that also has the space so that you don't put customers, at risk, from moving vehicles or whatever it might be. So there's a balance there. But I do like the mobile business plan for sure. I have enjoyed that. So I don't think I'll be moving away from that anytime soon.
Do you see yourself growing into more of the roasting bean side and delivering that to, like, say, cafes or restaurants and so on?
I thought so. I'd probably say 18 months ago, I in my head, that was where I was wanting to transition. I was wanting to vertically integrate and acquire more of the supply chain. I was getting into roasting myself and learning a new skill set, and I found it really, really interesting because obviously coming from a bit of a farming background, there was sort of tapping into that element as well, where you were getting to know all of the different coffee beans, the varietals, all the conditions and the origins as well, and opening up a whole other set of parameters that was available to me. So at that point, I did think so, but at the same time, you've also then got, you're transforming the business entirely, really, aren't you? So whole different business model, need for more premises space, and roasting I found was something that was all about volume of scale. So trying to minimize the number of batches that you had to do in order to keep consistency and repeatability. And because you've got so many different external factors that affect the roasting process, whether that be the weather that day, the temperature, all that sort of thing, trying to minimize the number of batches you were doing was really important to try and keep that consistency on the other side. So I think for me, that was just a little bit of a step too early. Mm-hmm. So I kind of reined that roasting side back a little bit. And I now work with a contact of mine down in Edinburgh, and we sort of collaborate a lot on the roasting now as well, because he's got access to more basically bigger equipment and more space than I do. So we kind of put our heads together to bring out new blends and coffees and things like that, and sample roast. And he does the majority of the production roasts now. So I've kind of outsourced that a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's actually working really well for us, because when we do events and we're on that schedule, I don't have time to spend 2 days roasting and doing all that as well. So it's actually worked out really well.
It's not a negative, it's a positive that you've done the exercise and figured out that. I think a lot of people have to test their business to see how vertical you can go, because I think I told you on the phone the other day, Henry Ford owned land with rubber trees in the hope to make his own tires. And then there was a big crash back then. And then he realized, well, no, that don't make sense. Like, we're holding all this stock, we're weighing the company down. And I think more than ever today, you've got to be very nimble. If there's something in the market that creates a collapse or something, you've got to be nimble to move around it. If your customers are just not appreciating the fact that you roast it, why are you actually roasting it? And if the risk is that every now and then 1 out of 10 batches are burnt or even raw, then again, why risk it? Why not just outsource it, like you say? So when you pay for 10 kilos of beans, those 10 kilos of beans are perfect, rather than trying to do 10 kilos of beans yourself and then having only 9 kilos that are usable. Imagine it from a customer point of view, like saying, oh, sorry, the coffee's not great today. I slightly burnt my beans when I roasted them yesterday. They're going to be like, they're not going to be happy.
No, you need that consistency for sure.
Yeah, you need consistency. And I think even the likes of McDonald's, they're not roasting their own beans. They're just paying somebody else to do it for them really good. I'm always questioning, how vertical do we go when we're having this exercise right now? Because, we're building a production facility, and, when do you go a step further again? Do you do it again? So you've got to be careful sometimes, because I think we all fantasize in business that we want to own everything from A to Z, but actually sometimes you're better off just doing A to C, and that's absolutely. And that's fine, because let somebody else do the rest who's really good at it.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's a really good point. I kind of figured out that for me, at least in my case with the artisan coffee, that actually I was better off staying within my lane and really owning that well and doing that as best as I possibly could, rather than trying to stretch myself too much and acquire further down into the supply chain. And that just made sense, actually, that it was better off doing one thing really well than trying to be everything in that supply chain as well. Just absolutely.
There's a coffee place I go to in a little suburb of Bournemouth, which is called Westbourne. And this coffee shop's probably the same size as my bedroom. Like, there's really not a lot of room. You can just about fit. I think I told you, it's smaller than your van. Yeah. Like, it's tiny. Like, always busy. You go there and it's just this, like, 6 or 7 people in the front, as in having their coffee. And I just don't get it. I'm just like, why don't you get your coffee and leave? But there's something about the vibe of the place. If you had a static place, this would be your place. I could just see it. It fits in your brand. Like, and you think there's no room to sit, but people are sort of leaning against the wall, they perch themselves against something. And yet they're feeling the vibe. They have their coffee. They probably stay for 10, 20 minutes and they go. From what I can tell, because I've never really spent that long in there because I'm trying to get out, they don't have all these the coffees with the squirty hazelnut things and all that. It's just flat white, probably do cappuccino, they do black, they do Americanos, they do the basic nice coffees. And I say basic not in a derogatory way, I just mean no faffing. And there's two guys and they're just constantly bosh, 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 bosh. What can I get you? Bosh, bosh, bosh. Like, and they're quite amiable. They're chatty, you know. When you've got the customer in front of you, they're as chatty as they can be for that, however long it takes to make that coffee. And it probably helps that there is two of them sharing out that process.
Absolutely.
When it opened and my friend took me there, I genuinely thought this is never going to work. I just cannot see it. And yet it's always busy. Their overheads are probably really low, because it is the same size as my bedroom. I think it's in a very busy place. I think there's enough people there that really appreciate great coffee. And within 50 meters, you have got a Starbucks, a Costa Coffee. You've got about 4 bakeries that all do coffee. You've probably got an M&S with a coffee machine in it. And that's probably, I was thinking traditionally, like, who else is going to want coffee? And one thing that has surprised me, the answer is nearly always there's more people that want coffee. Because I think what it is with the coffee market, and we've already discussed the sort of big players in it, is that within that, how big the coffee market is, there's all those different niches, what people like. So, you know, people that don't want all those squirty things and people that just want a really nice, and I don't like them, but I'm not trying to judge them, but they will go to somewhere who has all of those, like Costa, like Starbucks and whoever. And someone that just wants a highly roasted or a dark coffee that's done really well, they're going to go to an artisan place. And I guess there's probably a financial proposition as well. Some people don't want to pay for that, and some people want to have volume and have a 400 ml drink.
Absolutely. And doing the events and stuff, you come across a wide spectrum of the demographic as well. And you are tapping into many different types of customers. And you're right, there are some people's what they perceive as value to them can vary massively. Some people value size of drink to be really important. So actually going to Starbucks, that's going to do them absolutely fine, because they're going to get that 16-ounce black coffee or latte to go. But again, there are plenty of people that want that they perceive their value is in quality, and that's where the artisan stuff comes in there as well. And they also want a very focused approach as well. So when you say there with that shop that had a very limited amount on their menu board, well, that's something that people just know. People that like coffee will see that and go, actually, yeah, no, this is a proper coffee place. They've got the aesthetics. They can tell a lot by the equipment that's on the bar as well. There are plenty of people that can just literally look at your shop window and go, yeah, they'll do coffee well, and then that's you've got them.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think if I even break down my habits, for example, if I go to Starbucks, I'm getting a small blonde Americano with an extra shot. Yeah, so I know,
because you know just what you like.
Because I know what I like, and I know that I need an extra shot, and that's me all over. If I go to McDonald's, the coffee isn't the best coffee, but it also costs hardly anything. But it's actually it's not coffee; it's Wi-Fi. Yeah, so I'm getting a small black coffee again with a separate espresso that I tip in, because that's me all over. If I'm there, it's because it's really early in the morning. I need caffeine. So, and it's Wi-Fi again. It's actually, I'm using the coffee as a medium because I need to work before I go somewhere. But for the most part, if I'm going Costa Coffee, I'm not getting a black Americano because it always tastes bitter and dark. So I always get a flat white in Costa Coffee. So in my head, I'm that typical consumer. I know everything that I'm getting before I go to a certain place. You know, so I think you're right. That's just one person. Imagine a whole collective of people that think like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so if you're at a show that's got 50,000 people there, well, you've got many, and in a concentrated space as well, you've got many, many different types of people that you can cater to. So it's important. So if we're the artisan coffee van, so people that want that artisan coffee know that they come to us. But then if there's people that just want a generic coffee, regular brew or something like that, then there are plenty of catering vans that do that also. So it's like in towns and cities as well. There's a shop there to suit a certain part of the demographic.
Talking of every place that does coffee, there's probably one place that I've one business type that I've seen where coffee doesn't work, and that is a takeaway fish and chip shop. Like, that is my background.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've noticed, and I've seen people try it, and it just doesn't work. Like, they'll put in like rego machines or whatever, just to, like, whatever they can do. And I had this conversation with a friend of mine, and he basically just put in, and this is strictly takeaway, so not restaurant with a sit down, and he just put in a hot water kettle, like a big kettle, like I think it holds up 40 litres or something. And then he just put Yorkshire tea cups and Nescafe cups. He basically does it really cheap, so like £1 or something, And he said he probably sells, 20, 30 cups a week. But the investment is really, really low. And there's no waste because it's Nescafe cup and it's Yorkshire tea. And because he sells it really cheap, no one ever complains because it is actually what that demographic wants. But when we've seen other fish and chip shops do a real good coffee offering, it sort of always falls flat. And I always wonder, is that because when you're having fish and chips, it doesn't really go with coffee?
Probably. Maybe also the time of day as well. That's also important. Are most people buying their fish and chips in the evening, late afternoon? Probably.
Well, I just think, and then if you then separate the fish and chip purchase out, because you can go anywhere for a coffee if you're passing. So you can go to McDonald's and buy a coffee without a Big Mac, let's say. But again, I wouldn't go to a fish and chip shop for a coffee without a fish and chip. So, but I've noticed that, it was just one area where I've noticed that actually it doesn't really work at all. Like, it doesn't work. Let's give our listeners an awareness of what the waves are. So first wave coffee is probably brands like Nescafe, Maxwell House, granulated coffees. People did them at home. Mostly, I guess it was mostly Robusta beans that they then boiled them up, ground them, and then I think back in the old days they'd spray it in a hot tunnel and they'd bang the tunnel, and that's how they got the powder. That very super dark, bitter taste, needs milk, sugar, or creamer to make it palatable for many. But that was pretty much what coffee was, and especially in America, because I think Britain, being a tea culture first, probably didn't really get onto that till after. Although I think it did get popular, especially in offices and so on. And then we had the second wave, which is essentially what you said, which is Starbucks, Costa Coffee, and so on, which probably started to get us all a little bit excited about coffee, maybe, especially at a younger age.
Absolutely.
And then, but it still continued to some degree the trend of a dark coffee. Only now have they started doing lower roasted coffees and so on. The baristas were probably more focused on the cafe experience than on the beans, because all the beans are the same in a Starbucks and so on. And then we've got what we call the third wave coffee, which is essentially what you're on the back of, which is artisan, good quality, knowing where your beans come from, caring a little bit more, making it a bit slower. Where do you see it going?
There's a few different factors which could affect where it goes. Obviously, technology being one thing, so that would probably try and progress coffee even further, going into more of a scientific and data-orientated, almost laboratory environment where you're trying to push extraction percentages and get the very best out of, squeeze that absolutely everything out of that coffee bean, as well as celebrating how diverse coffee is depending on where you go. So if you get coffee beans from Ethiopia, Rwanda, Peru, Brazil, Colombia, I mean, it's a wide spectrum. And also as well, there are so many other origins involved nowadays as well, because importing and exporting has become so globalized, and you're able to tap into so many more regions than you were before, especially as a small or micro roasting based business. Before, there was just no way that you could get those greens and stuff in because you weren't a big enough player, or that you had to go to origin and get some sort of relationship going with an export company to actually get the beans into the UK. So I'd probably say technology could take it one way, but then there could also be some threats to it too, thinking that the environment would be something that could have its challenges in terms of the yields and crops and stuff like that. Changing climate might massively reduce yields in certain places. It might make some origins almost ungrowable, but that might present opportunities to other close by countries to start growing more coffee. So there's a lot in there. There could also be new varietals as well.
Yeah.
Again, technology and science could start, merging Robusta and our Arabica beans together. There might be some beans that become coffee plants, particularly that become more robust against the harsh weathers and climates and stuff like that. So I could see there being a number of different ways it could all go, and probably a lot of it out of control as well.
What do you feel like with consumers? What do you think they are going to start driving? So you think environmental stuff. So they want to know more about where the coffees come from.
Absolutely. They want the story. They want to know exactly where that bean's travelled from.
That's probably going to be one point. Like if you look at McDonald's, which is probably on the price level, probably the lowest coffee you can get, and they have fair trade coffee. A lot of people aren't fans of fair trade coffee because they don't see it as a minimum wage that the coffee growers get. They almost see it as a maximum wage that coffee growers get. So although it's better than what they were probably getting before, it's not actually, and this isn't McDonald's fault, this is just the Fair Trade Association essentially. But some people see that as, we should be paying more for coffee, so that because those people can then obviously live. And the same argument for cocoa and sugar and so on. So will consumers start voting with their feet, or will they just be like, no, you know what, this coffee tastes nice. I don't really care that, it's from here. They didn't tell me where it was from, but it tastes nice. And it's not overly expensive, or maybe it is expensive, but they still didn't tell me where it's from and it tastes bloody good. So I'm just going to ignore the fact that it's someone's been underpaid in the chain somewhere. Do you think, or do you think, again, there's lots of different consumers that will make their choices as they go along?
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways it could go. I think you could find that people that are really into their coffee will start having more of an awareness about that as well, and they will be happy to pay £4+ for a really good cup of coffee, and they know exactly where it's come from. They know, and it could be also that it's a specialty coffee as well, because there are lots of different rare varietals of coffee and experimentations down the harvesting and processing, which opens up more flavors and all that sort of thing as well. So there could be that sort of side of things, but there could also be very money conscious consumers that go, actually, you know what, I'm spending too much on coffee out and about. So I think and like COVID also showed as well, there's more people making quality coffee back into the house, back in the home. So it's almost like it's gone full cycle. So it started off in the home. We went out to coffee shops. We embraced the lifestyle of going to coffee shops. We then started making it a craft and making it an artisan product. It might then split into two there, where it then starts to take that artisan into a science and beyond. But we might, for a good chunk of the demographic that just want a good cup of coffee, just a good cup of coffee, we might cycle all the way back to the beginning, and that's where you've got really good home equipment and people doing all of their online coffee subscriptions and stuff and getting beans delivered to the house, and that's where they enjoy the majority of their caffeine.
I'm a really big fan of making coffee at home. I don't have machines. I just like a Mochi espresso pot. I've got an AeroPress and I've got a French press. The AeroPress really surprised me. I don't know if you've used one.
Yeah.
Really surprised me because I thought it's a toy. The guy that invented the Frisbee for a start. So I thought it's clearly going to be a toy. I've bought 3 now, only because they're rubber seal. I can't be arsed just buy another rubber seal. So I just buy a new one. And it's just me. Well, by the time I change it and then it doesn't fit, and get a new one.
15 quid and you got a new one.
Yeah, exactly. It's not expensive at all. I just thought it was going to be a gimmick. I was on a Facebook group and they were saying, oh, you've got to do this, get this grind, get this, do that. And I thought, it's a gimmick. It's not going to be any good. The first one I made was terrible. But I was addicted to try and get it right. And then it was like, well, add this much, do this, do that. And then you drink it and you're like,
wow,
oh my God. That's actually
now
I get it. And
now
you're like,
I get it. Yeah.
And there was so many tips and tricks that I just thought, this is clever stuff. Yeah. And people are obsessed. People are obsessed. So you're right. I think the whole coffee market has massively grown into people that love coffee at home as well. Not just a nice cup of tea. They want that coffee to be awesome too. And obviously there's others that just want a Nescafe with milk, and that's fine too, because that's what people want.
Well, convenience being the other factor at home, because some people don't necessarily want to put the time in to prep making an awesome filter coffee with a V60 or an
Yeah,
AeroPress or something like that.
yeah,
They just want to be able to press a button and they get a nice black coffee or latte or something. So then you've got your pod machines and stuff that come into things as well. Specialty coffees sort of branched into that too, where you're starting to now get more clever pod machines that can use specialty beans within them. So you're still keeping that convenience factor, but you're upping the quality again.
I can't use a V60 with the nice glass jug. I've had 3 glass jugs and every single one's broken. And I mean within days. I mean, you'd fill it up to wash it and then I'd literally just put it on the drainer. And it'd be the tiniest thing that happened to it, and it cracks. And and the wife bought me another one, and I was like, "Don't, it's going to break." She goes, "No, it's fine," and it broke. And I'm just like, why do we bother doing this to ourselves? It's depressing. So now I've kept the thingy, the cone thing, the dripper,
yeah.
And I just do it straight into a cup if I want it now. Like just do it straight.
Yeah. Happy days.
But you're right, and when I'm not when I haven't got time to spend that time on making a nice brew at home, I'll just use. I've got Marks and Spencer's granulated coffee, which for a granulated coffee is surprisingly good. Like and it's the only one we have at work, to be honest. Because if I'm going to drink coffee at work, I ain't got all that time to do that.
Sure,
so
other things to do.
Got other things to do. I just haven't got the time. I think it's a really nice coffee. It's just interesting how the coffee industry is going, and I love the fact that you've thrown yourself into a really competitive market. I like that. I genuinely like that because it's a market that has a lot of buoyancy. It's not stagnant. There's innovation. There's a lot of competition. And I think if you're still doing well in it, that's good. Do you do anything like cold brew?
Yeah, that's one thing you mentioned before, how we've kind of been influenced a bit from the European and the American markets. Well, in America, they love cold coffee. They love their cold brew. Iced Americanos and all the different variants of that too. So we actually find at events, and this is one thing I've sort of started to implement a lot more in the last sort of 12 months, is the ability to switch from doing a hot coffee offering to a cold coffee offering, So if you are at an event and say you're Thursday and Friday, because the weather in the UK is so unpredictable, it's actually a bit depressing, because on Thursday it could be pouring down with rain and everyone just wants a hot drink, you're hitting hot chocolates, you're doing teas, you're doing coffees, but you might get a scorcher in the middle of summer. You might get an absolute scorcher on the Saturday.
What a surprise.
And all of a sudden the ice cream vendor next door to you has the biggest queue in the world and you've got absolutely nothing. So it's really important to be able to pivot really quickly, switch up that offering and have all your cold coffee offerings, have your affogatos as well, so you're doing espresso with the ice cream, and just change that up so that you're able to facilitate whatever the weather, and that's really important too.
No, it is. It massively is. I love a cold brew. In the summer, I would mostly. I've got this big jug at home that fits in the fridge, and I'll just put 4 or 5 spoons of ground coffee in it, and freshly ground coffee, and then just fill it with water, and then the next day I'll pass it through the V60. And then
Nice.
the filter pads that I've got, the filter thing, cones, and then I'll put it back in the fridge. It's fine. I love it. I just keep going back to it.
Yeah, it keeps in the fridge for a couple of weeks, actually, a good cold brew.
And it also, I don't know if you've noticed this, I'm sure you have, there's almost citrusy notes to coffee that hasn't been brewed. Like, I don't know, like there's some nice, you get so many different flavor profiles, flavor notes from a coffee that hasn't been cooked as such.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
that all comes down into the roasting process there.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the varietal and also the roaster themselves. Every roaster's got a slightly different approach in how they like to roast coffee, whether that be more developed, which means basically a darker roast, or less developed, which is more of a lighter roast. That's going to bring out, there's like a bit of a curve in roasting where you basically move from more sour, sort of tart notes, and then you kind of hit a sweet spot, like a genuinely sweet part. And then the more you go past, your caramelization kind of starts to break down the sugars and stuff like that, and you get more of those classic bitter, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you get more bitter and robust more intense flavors coming in down that way. So it all depends on the roasting approach, really.
You've hit the nail on the head. I think we love coffee, and everyone should drink more coffee, even not eat it. Go ahead if you want.
Without syrups, though. Drink proper coffee.
I think so. I think, be an adult and have a proper coffee. I think you'll enjoy it more. And,
I think if you're if you're going to an artisan business and you kind of, it's part of the experience to embrace that coffee from whatever origin or the roaster as well. Because you might also go to a specific coffee outlet because they supply and stock a roaster that you love, and the way they roast coffee is exactly what you're after. So I think in an artisan business, that makes a massive, massive importance. It's a bit, you can compare that to the whiskey or the wine or the gin businesses and stuff as well, where, you're not going to go and you're not going to critique a whiskey maker for the size of the dram that they give you. It's all about the process and everything that's gone into it. And coffee can be like that too. But at the same time, we've got that other side where people want to almost kind of make it like a fast food outlet, and you want that speed of service, but at the same time you want to customize the drink, you want to add things, whether that be sweeteners and syrups and all the extra sort of things with it, and that's fine. But there's other coffee players that do that, and I think that's where you can sort of tick all the boxes.
And I think in a nutshell that explains why Costa Coffee was bought out by Coca-Cola. Costa Coffee has become a wider drinks business, not just coffee. I think they are just called Costa now anyway, but it's not Costa Coffee strictly anymore. Yeah. So I think that explains exactly why that. But Austen, thank you so much for your time today. I've learned so much, and so have our listeners, and I think everyone should go on your website and have a look, follow you on Facebook and Instagram. I want to follow your progress even more, so hopefully in a year's time or 2 years' time, when you've made you make the big move sooner, we'll get you back on and we'll have another chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Been great, mate. Have a great day. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to Austen as much as I enjoyed talking to him. I really want to get Austen back on in the future. What do you guys think about coffee? Does it float your boat or not really bothered? Today's episode product focus was the Ceres Natural Degreaser, your ultimate solution for turbocharged natural cleaning. It's perfect for tackling tough grease stains in professional kitchens and beyond. And don't be fooled by its natural composition. This powerful non-caustic powder degreaser works wonders on all surfaces. It works on stains, including clothing. It's ideal for everything. And remember, it's non-caustic, with no perfume and no dye. And no BPA, no phosphate. It's economical and biodegradable. Remember, to give you all a little treat, I'd like to buy the first 5 listeners of the Ceres Podcast a pouch of Morley's 1972 coffee beans. If you don't have a grinder, let me know, and I'll order you some of the ground coffee. If you want to keep in the loop what we're doing at Ceres, then you should be following us on social media. But to get the news and the offers delivered to your inbox, join our mailing list, and the link is going to be in the episode show notes. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends and on social media. If you like this episode, then chances are your friends in the industry will too.